Are you back in Blighty now, or are you still in
No,
Mexico?
still in Tulum until end of this month, and then Poland for a week, and then back in the UK, I think.
Do you
How
feel
about
like
you?
you same place I'm always, London,
Yeah.
about 2 doors down from my house. Um, do you feel like you did too much or too little traveling when you were a younger man?
Well, that's kind of a big question. I think I'd always traveled a lot. So, well, it's interesting. So, I think my family, we weren't a very rich family, so we didn't go on expensive holidays. The ones that I do remember were to relatively cheap locations. We went to the south of France and did a camping trip, and I remember that very fondly. That when I then went to boarding school, I met lots of sort of international people, probably kind of spurred my appetite. And then I did this, my first big trip was to Sweden, where I lived for kind of 4 months. And that was just mind bending. First time to get on a plane and go anywhere. And then after that, I did a year in the US during, it was an exchange scheme, and I went for that. And that again, living a year somewhere is a different kind of experience, you know? And then after that, I started to travel, much more. I think through some of the jobs that I had, that sort of collapsed. And obviously, when you have a family, it's a different story. So it probably, in some roles, like the BBC, for example, you don't really travel very much. But BP, obviously, going back and forwards to Houston, consulting you kind of do, but just for work. So yeah, and then lockdown came along, and it felt quite miserable just being trapped in a room. So I love travel. I think but it's different to just holidaying, you know?
Mm, yeah, yeah. I quite enjoyed COVID. I quite enjoyed the lack of responsibility. Well, not the lack of responsibility, but like the lack of pressure to do anything.
Mm.
We were still working through it, but I could go out and do my run. I pretty much ran down the centre of Oxford Street on a Saturday lunchtime, and it was dead. I was the only one there, could take in the sights and enjoy that. Um, so yeah, I quite liked that bit.
Yeah, but you know what you enjoy and what's good for you can often point in opposite directions. Do you know what
Yeah,
I mean? Because I empathize with what you're saying, because there's part of me that likes to establish this kind of tidy routine and
yeah,
stick to it almost, pathologically, and so I know what you mean about COVID, but there's also a point at which it's really interesting when I sort of, okay, I don't know your experience, but I know quite a few people have had this experience. Coming out of COVID, I experienced kind of going into social situations, a lot more social anxiety than I was anticipating. And I sort of realized, oh yeah, when you stop doing all of that, something starts to, you know, decline. Hey, Tom.
Hey, how you doing?
good. How are
Doing all
you?
right. Yeah. How about you?
Not too bad. This is like one of those classic moments where it's like good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you are, sort of thing, isn't it? I think.
I
Yeah,
like
Global
to think
you're.
like
team.
this.
What time is it? It's got to be 11, is it?
Just hit 11 here. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's 11. So end of my day. And Nick, are you still in Mexico, is it?
Yeah, it's 11 a.m. here, so yeah.
Look at that. Literally opposite ends of the time zone conundrum. Fun
Yeah.
and games.
Technology is so wonderful.
Look at it, exactly.
How are you finding Bangkok? You've only been there like what, a week now, is it? Or
Well, I'm
I forgot when we
actually
spoke, to be honest.
Yeah, so well, I was in Bangkok when we spoke, which was like must have been about a week ago, right? I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm now actually in Chiang Mai, so I've been in Chiang Mai for 6 nights, and then tomorrow down to Phuket to finish off with a little bit of beach time. So yeah, it's been cool, sort of like hopping around. So yeah, no, it's been good, and it's because we kind of like fused it with a bit of a family holiday as well. So
Yeah.
my partner Joe, his sister, and her kids are all here. So they're all out on their final night tonight. And I'm like on the balcony. In a minute, I'll see them come back. And then I'll be the smug one when we're in the airport tomorrow morning, I reckon. But yeah, it's all good. It's all
Oh,
good.
so using a podcast as an excuse for not
For
going
being
out and
smug
party.
tomorrow. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, cool. Have you accumulated more wristbands than the last time I saw you? Have you become more of a hippie? What's
Quite
the
possibly.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple
yeah?
extra ones there. I won't show you what they say on them, right? Because they're the ones, they're those, the ones that they bring on the board like that, and you're like, what? And then it seems like
Yeah.
a good idea at the time, but it's they're probably the NSFW versions. But yeah, collecting them up for sure.
Good stuff. Well, I guess I don't actually know you that well, Tom, because we only met last week. But yeah, no, I thought I just enjoyed chatting to you, and I thought get you on. You're a friend of Gemma's. Obviously Nick and I know Gemma very well as well, and
Yeah,
I just thought you were doing some interesting stuff, and we're also from the same part of the world originally. So you were saying you're from Ashburton, I'm from Ivor Bridge, which is down the road. So
yeah.
Devon boys, and yeah, why not? Fuck not. Let's just have a conversation, see where we end up. That's the plan.
Exactly. And that, like, I love it when you find those like little pieces of connection that you've got with other people.
Mm,
And it's like, oh, and then you end up, there ends up being always like some random connection. And then actually you're like, hold on, how did this even happen? And it's like, it cements in my mind this thing about the degrees of separation. Like even in Chiang Mai, someone messaged me and was like, I'm there now. And I was like, what? And we were going to go for a drink. We never actually got around to doing it in the end, but it's almost like there's always things like that happen, right?
yeah,
Yeah. What would
love
be the
that.
things that are most important to you, Tom? You know, like the things that really matter to you in your life, so we can hunt down some of those kind of connections.
Big questions altogether, right? So it's interesting, right? Because I'm in this interesting stage of my life where I've been like in one large corporate for such a long time, like 15-year stint. I was like, how did that happen? The boy starts as a cashier down in the southwest of England, and then ends up doing like regional work, innovation work, moves to London, and then I just got to the point where I was like, actually, I need to explore and have like different experiences. So yeah, so that's kind of why like where I'm at the moment is quite an interesting phase of like life, because I decided I was gonna make this leap and like go solo. And then like, can I try and tie that in with like a bit of exploration as well? Because I never did the travel thing. So now I'm like, well, if I'm going to go there, I'm going to go and check out the world of work, because I'm a bit obsessed with like how we work and how we do it better, but also like what does the future of work look like? So yeah, so I've been doing quite a bit of like exploring the digital nomad scene since I've been over here. So that's been really fun, and just meeting people, making those connections. I went to like a digital nomad meetup in Bangkok just to like catch up with some people that were living that life already. And I was just like, oh, well, like, what do you do? And it's just it's really interesting to see that kind of like shift for so many people around looking for a different style of life where their work is part of it, but it doesn't necessarily dominate it. And then how they're just kind of adapting to that flexible way of living. So
I'm doing the same thing. I mean, it's an interesting thing. I guess we're all interested in the future of work, and so those would be cool kind of connections. But I go to this place in Tulum, Digital Jungle, and it's been interesting because I'm a bit of an introvert. I suspect you're more of an extrovert. So I watch other people kind of making these connections and chatting, and I think, oh, that's interesting. And I've noticed there's like a really interesting mix of, there's a lot of Canadians. There's a Dutch guy who's very loud on all of his conference calls. There's quite a few Russians, and I was bumping into all these Russians all over Tulum, like, people like Russian DJs and Russian. I was like, wow, why are there so many Russians? And then it
What
sort
do
of
you
clicked.
think of the
It's like,
war?
yes, yes. Now I understand why. So there are people here for, I guess, different reasons and kind of
yeah.
motivations. Lots of digital people, as for obvious reasons, is like, you can do that remotely well. Lots of, people working on apps and AI and, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it is interesting. What's been your perception so far, Tom?
So I think there's a few things I noticed in particular, which are in Bangkok. Like I definitely noticed in Bangkok, because I also went to Kenya just after I left Lloyd's, and I was because I'm half Kenyan. My sister lives out there, and I think that Africa is going to be the next like nomad hub. Like it's definitely going to be the next skills hub of the future, with the youth of the demographic of the whole continent, and like the tech development in Kenya, calling it the Silicon Savannah. That is
Nice.
is definitely going to be really interesting, because like we'll get to 2050 and it's something like 25% of the globe's population will be African. You're thinking
Mm.
almost like, well, what does that mean for organizations and like the skills strategy when you think about that? I definitely think that what I noticed in Bangkok significantly, which was different to Kenya, was this kind of like the rise of this touchdown culture. So it's
Mm.
almost like the city is much more set up for that, like touchdown in the coffee shops. The amount of
Yeah.
coffee shops that I went to that had like a meeting room that you can just use, or like some quiet spaces that you can do calls. So it's almost like you don't even necessarily need to be in a co-working space, which I thought was just quite an interesting observation, how that whole city almost felt like that. And like Charlie, when we caught up, I was in a shopping mall and I'd happened to find like an innovation hub that had like a booth and a couple of spaces that I could use. So I think it's interesting to see how different cities start to adapt to, I guess it's what people
It
are
is. I
wanting.
worry about it though. As somebody, it sounds like we're all interested in future work. So I was in Barcelona recently, and they set up this kind of tech hub, and I sat through this whole presentation where they were explaining the rationale. They were like, "We're going to be the next Silicon Valley." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." And then when I go to Warsaw has upgraded kind of massively, and there's like we're the new drives the central, I don't know, digital kind of resource thing. And then interesting to hear about Africa. And I think it's what I worry about a little bit is that what drove, I think, a lot of that activity was that, frankly, it was just cheaper. If you wanted digital people, you could find amazing graphical designers or programmers in kind of Poland or whatever, or Africa. And so that outsourcing, of organizations kind of drove some of that activity. And now I'm seeing so many of those roles going to AI. It looks like AI is the new outsourcing. There's barely a day goes by. I saw a thing just yesterday on paralegals. Turns out that, Claude can do basically paralegal work now. And there's a sort of like $300 billion industry that just goes poof, potentially overnight. And I know some of that's overhyped, but I also think, ooh, I wonder what's going to happen.
Mm.
Yeah. I saw a really interesting article the other day around I think it was like from like Gartner's like future of work trends. It was talking about how we may start to see almost that like from tech to trades, where like people start to to seek out more hands-on trade type experience work, because
Yeah.
in this current term that we see, it
Yeah.
looks like there's going to be more opportunities that people can feel a bit more comfortable for a longer period of time. But I think it's definitely like, yeah, particularly like you said, like when you think about those entry level jobs, like I started in the bank as a cashier and I was like, I didn't really know what I was doing. Like I just wanted to go and experience working somewhere. And that's, I think, where that challenge is around, well, what does that mean for entry level jobs? Like there's probably a handful of cashier roles in South Devon now. So how do you then create entry level opportunities for people that want to enter the workforce if AI is stripping out a big layer of that as well?
Yeah. What do you think, Charlie?
I think we went from digital nomadness to AI pretty quickly. So, um, yeah, what do I think? I feel like it's like watching influence on Instagram. It feels like I'm being bombarded with all of the answers and all of the fear at the same time. And I'm pretty confident, at least for myself, that when it becomes required, I will do what's required to make a living out of wherever the chips fall. So I know that isn't a very strategic and long-term and democratic view of what's happening, but I'm just looking at it from my own perspective. I think if you can build a good consultancy, you can basically pivot to any kind of context. So I've dabbled with the idea of just pivoting the whole business to focus on sustainability because that's what I'm passionate about. And ultimately it's about problem solving. So I think that, yeah, I think the chips will fall and I think Russ made the point, like there will be disruption. That's what we know is happening. We know that's going to be the case. Do I think it's worthwhile spending time worrying about what that disruption is going to look like? Probably not, because I think that probably the future is more different than we can think about, and in some ways more similar than we think as well, because we always tend to sort of apply the same lens to all the, you know, all the new stuff that comes. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where my brain is, which is kind of what
Well,
the question was.
I mean, I'm inclined to agree with Tom's answer, which is pivoting to kind of physical roles, plumbers, electricians, hairdressers, because the robots aren't going to get there terribly fast.
You don't want to
So,
have your head chopped off by a robot, but you don't mind it doing, you don't mind it doing some analysis.
yes. Oh, slight
It,
slip. Yeah.
what
Yeah.
I think is promising though, right, which I love, like, is this kind of how at times when it feels like the tech might be coming and taking over, like we always seem to, as like a species, gravitate towards the need for human connection. And like I think to it like now, it's almost like you're in this high tech environment, but then also you got all this kind of content that's being created, and it's almost like the level of trust that we all start to then have in the things we're consuming on like social media or like posts and anything. We can't be as like sure as we were before of it being a human that's interacting with us. Like you probably all had that moment where like you've been caught out, but and then you end up starting a conversation. You're like, hold on a minute, this isn't you. So, and I think it's that kind of, and it like we saw it in COVID as well, right? Where actually we were like the one thing we were craving was human connection. So like that's I think my reason to be positive is that I think there's like something in us craves that the less that it's there, and hopefully that can
Yeah.
become something that is we just
I
hold
think
on
it's
to.
a really interesting observation, but I think it's a double-edged sword, if I can sort of put it that way, because I don't know if you know this, but in 2025, number one use of ChatGPT was companionship. So, Jean-Paul Sartre famously said, kind of hell is other people. And why would we crave other people as well as finding them hell? Well, it's kind of like we do want that connection. And it's clear from all of the kind of the TikToks about dating and red flags and green flags. But what people are finding is that other people aren't like most digital stuff. It's like on demand. Have you like it? You can have you can have your hamburger have you like it, but you can't have your partner have you like it. And so that craving for connection also creates a demand that wants to be satisfied, I guess. And I do see AI stepping into that in a way which is sort of deeply troubling, which is like more and more young men, for example, are getting AI girlfriends. And the appeal of them is that they offer that illusion of connection without any of the downsides of human beings,
Mm.
and so I think that market, if you want to put it that way, is lots of digital people eyeing that, I think, greedily. I saw that. I know there's a whole hoo-ha in France about Grok, and
Yeah,
41% of the images apparently that Grok was able to generate were sexually related. So, I think people are
it's
thinking,
unbelievable.
people do have these kind of profound cravings, connection
Mm,
amongst them. We can satisfy those with AI. But I also
Mm.
think the flip side, just to stop talking, is like, um, it would be great for us as learning professionals to be helping people to connect in a human way, like getting people together in a room. That's why I hold out hope for us as kind of experienced designers, that we can actually create events and experiences which are moving for people and create that sense of connection and belonging and all that sort of good stuff. So yeah, super interesting.
Tom, do you describe yourself as a learning and development professional?
And it's interesting, right? Because I don't think I was, but I think perhaps now I am a bit more. I'm more of a kind of I'm more of a I've always kind of gravitated towards culture and workplace culture. And then I kind of just like, but then I've also always run events and experiences and things like hackathons and kind of leadership experiences. And I actually then sort of feel like I've actually almost like, because of my like obsession with workplace culture and how like teams operate, I've slipped more into the kind of learning professional. So I guess I kind of straddle a bit of both, but it's a bit of a roundabout way of coming into the field. So yeah, I think it's all, and it's like, look, it's all learning, right? We're always learning. So it's kind of um yeah, I never was like the interesting thing for me, right, is that I never really was like to describe this. I was never a passionate learner. I was always like passionately curious. So that obviously then leads to you learning more. And then that has led me to doing things now, like where I never would have thought. Like I've just become like a community, a chair of a governors for two secondary schools. I was like, me? Like doing this? But it's because I'm kind of curious around like how are we helping young people into that future like world of work, and then what does the learning need to look like? So I guess that's kind of where I guess I've probably arrived in a slightly different to traditional route, but yeah, I guess I am. I feel
What
like
would
I'm
you
there.
say to a young person? Because there's this sort of like the thing that you hear as a young person is quite worrying if you look at a young person in the job market, because there's so much
Yeah.
turbulence, so much uncertainty as to what roles will continue to exist. There's this consistent line now that everything that you're learning at university will be, completely changed
Hmm.
by the time you
Yeah,
leave university and all this kind of stuff. And I do think that I hear that young people are kind of really worried by that. And so what would you say to somebody in terms of your point about, how can I prepare for the future of work? What would you advise
yeah.
them?
It's really interesting as well because the whole reason that I got involved with this governor work was because I went back to my old secondary school at the beginning of this academic year, in September, and just to be able to talk about my journey, what I'd done, and my career path. And I was kind of like I was quite surprised by the lack of confidence, and I spoke to the new intake of the sixth form. And then I went and spoke to the year 10s. Very different experiences when you're giving a talk to two groups. But it was really fun. But yeah, like, and I was kind of like surprised, I guess, that the lack of confidence of what they feel that they can bring to the workforce. And I was speaking to one guy in particular, who was like, I just don't feel like I've got it all figured out. Like I don't know what I want to do. Everyone else feels like they do. And I just think that like I'm just not getting anywhere. And I was like, well, what is it that what is it you're doing at the moment? Like, and he was saying, well, I'm really interested in sociology and criminology. Like, well, look, those are two things where you're talking and looking at the human like condition and behavior. You couldn't have picked better topics to pick. And he's like, oh, okay. So I think there's a huge. So I think there's a couple of things. I think that one of those is like general. I think we probably underestimate how that confidence and but I guess maybe some of the gap in some instances is those interpersonal skills that people have or haven't developed. I think and it comes back down to like an old, like what I said to them when I was in that chat is like, all of the opportunities that I've like sought out have been because I've worked hard and I've said, yeah, I'll give that a go. Like, so it's almost, I think a lot of it comes down to having the attitude, like so
Um,
much of the skills. And when we talk about skills, like you said there, Nick, like the 5 years is the last time I was looking at some of this skill stuff. It's like the shelf life of a skill is 5 years. And last time I looked, the tech skill was 2.5. So it's like to be able to plan for something, we just don't know what those skills that are going to be required in the future are going to be. And that's like linking back to the AI stuff is like changing by the week. So I think it's that kind of like adaptability,
mm,
interpersonal skills, um, and just be prepared to work hard and put your hand up for things.
I
And that's
think,
the
yeah,
only advice I think I could give right now.
listening to you and Charlie, though, I think if I could summarize it, you've given a really interesting picture. So confidence, that confidence in
Mm,
yourself, problem solving ability, you mentioned that
yeah.
a couple of times, and that adaptability kind of that goes with that. And then you mentioned, Tom, as well, kind of interpersonal skills, social skills, and and I would agree with that. And I just think it'd be great if the system actually focused on those things. Like, how do you give somebody confidence? How do you make them adaptable, good kind of problem solvers? How do you build their kind of social skills? Because it doesn't seem to be doing that at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's almost like, well, if we say these things are important, how do we create the conditions for people to actually learn those skills? And it's another reason why I'm particularly interested at the moment about this concept of us having 5 generations in the workforce, because I think there's so much that can be learned by putting those two people from completely different generations together and just letting them explore, but almost contracting that for a mutual exchange of wisdom. Because like there's things that I'm coming into the workforce as an apprentice, like fresh out of school. digital native, and I can chat to somebody else that's about to leave an organization on a later stage of their career or retiring, there's so much opportunity for like what can we learn from each other? How do we retain organizational knowledge, but at the same time, life skills that I wouldn't have thought I'd learn from somebody that's like 15, 16 years old, just coming fresh out of school. So I think there's like a real opportunity. And a couple of the last projects that I was doing before I left Lloyd's was like with the senior leaders. We did some storytelling sessions at one of their, all the cohorts went through this sort of 2-day off-site experience. And my session was at the very end of it. And it was all around storytelling, how it's evolved in the TikTok era. And you could see the look of horror on like the 350 senior leaders, most senior leaders across the organization, when I started talking about TikTok and storytelling, and then a creative challenge that they were going to have the opportunity to partake in. But what I did was bring in a cohort of Gen Z. It was like the TikTok squad that created the TikToks for the Lloyd's TikTok channel. And they acted as coaches. So they acted as a coach for each of this cohort, this group, a small group of 6. And actually coach them through telling stories using short form video. And the thing that came out of that, and again with a couple of others that like similar sort of experiences, the most value that they got from it was what they learned, what these senior leaders learned from their Gen Z coach. So it's like there's something in that for sure.
Mhm.
Is that, I didn't know Lloyd's had a TikTok channel. Is that Lloyd's Bank? Is that the
Lloyd's banking group, it probably would be.
And also, Tom's just started a TikTok journey of his own, Nick. So when we spoke
Oh,
last
yeah.
time, Tom, you were saying that you've committed to posting once a day since New Year. So
Yeah, it's
how's that
it's
going?
been it's been good. It's been interesting, and I'm a big fan, Nick, of your work as well. I mean, it's like I just love it, but almost like, is that how I'm using it as a way of processing my own thoughts and thinking about the stories that I'm going to tell, and then it's almost becomes like my TikTok and Instagram. It just helps me like get into the habit of telling short stories, and then I'm like, well, what does that translate to in a business context? And I might create something similar for LinkedIn off the back of it. So yeah, it's definitely a journey, but I just like enjoy doing it. So it's just like, yeah, the journey's on.
Yeah. What's your handle, Tom? What's the?
It's straight up Tom Kegode.
Oh, that's it.
It's not the easiest one to spell, but Kegode.
Yeah,
and that's
got it
me.
here.
and what's
Oh, and
yours, Charlie?
X as well. I've deleted TikTok, so I'm not on it at all anymore. I'm not already
You
on
just
Instagram.
decided that you're just
I'm
going
trying
to be
to
a
figure out how
grumpy
to
old
delete
geezer for the
Facebook.
remainder of your existence.
Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just really enjoying the stuff that I'm doing at the moment with, with work and stuff. I don't have. It feels like time I don't have mentally to give at the moment. I'm trying to. Obviously, my kids are 4 and 2. I'm trying to move house, and I'm running a business, and I'm delivering work, and I'm trying to fit in time to play football and exercise. So the idea that I don't have time to watch TV. I don't have time to do anything I want to do other than, eat, sleep, and do everything else that's going on. So I don't feel like I'm missing out at the moment. What I have been reflecting on is, I think there's a future where I basically need to be spending more of my time thinking and coming up with ideas and, cross-pollinating from different fields and developing new IP, because I enjoy doing that. And, I'll pick up a business book. I don't know, let's take Who Did, which is a marketing book. And I was reading the other day, and I'll probably get 3 pages in and I'll spend another half an hour writing ideas down, because it immediately sparks loads of ideas and thoughts. So it takes me ages to get through them, but I need like dedicated time to do that kind of stuff, and I can't do it at the minute. So that's a long way of saying, no, I'm not on TikTok. I don't feel like I'm missing out. I think that one day I will probably get back on it, and I might challenge myself to do what you're doing, Tom, and start kind of collating my thoughts a bit more clearly. But yeah, I see the value. I just don't have time. I'm sorry.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because it's almost like I'm like you so much with that bit. Like when I'm like get hold of a business book, like a couple of like ones in particular, and I'm just like I'm recommending it to everybody. Like the Octopus Organization at the moment is the one I'm just like, this is the things I've been talking about for the last 10 years.
Mm,
And it's kind of like so then I've kind of used that as an opportunity for me to do a bit like to reflect on what I've read. I'm like, interesting. Like what am
mm,
I now observing around like creating clarity? What am I observing around ownership or curiosity? So I don't know, like use the lenses that I find. And I just find it helps me. For me, it's probably maybe it's my learning style. Like it helps me to remember that. If
mm,
I've like had to think about, well, how can I make this into something that's potentially helpful for people? Because
mm,
that's always the thing. Um, but yeah, it has been
Yeah.
it's
Seems like reading
it's a
books
journey, sure.
is sort of on the way out, though. I think that
mm,
what's the consequence of that? Even anything long form appears to be vanishing.
Mm,
It's like people say, "Do you watch podcasts or whatever?" And I think, well, I say no, I don't really watch podcasts, but what I do watch is snippets of them. So you'll
mm,
see a snippet of Diary of a CEO, for example, and lots of little snippets, and they're even doing that with movies now, and
mm,
it's quite unsettling. Is that I've seen so many of the highlights of a given movie that I feel like it would be pointless watching the movie now. I'd just be stitching together all the bits that I've seen on on TikTok, and I guess
mm,
that it's almost inevitable now. It seems almost inevitable. And it's like, well, what does that mean for reading books? Like The Octopus you mentioned, it's probably nobody reads the book. What happens is that they follow somebody like you, Tom, who just does like, oh, I've just read this amazing book, The Octopus, and my key takeaways were one, two, three, and it's like, okay, so you don't read the book, you just listen to Tom, who you trust, giving his like top three takeaways. And then
mm,
somebody says, well, I've got this AI thing, which TikTok already has, which like creates an AI Tom because Tom's popular. And then AI Tom just does kind of book summaries. And I sort of feel like we're pretty much on the threshold of that now.
yeah, it's like
I
that kind
think,
of concept of Blinkist as well. Have you seen that? Where
yeah, I use
Blinkist and it can give
blinkers.
you
Yeah,
the summary.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
And I
that's
think
that
it
good.
is
is like,
yes. Let me talk about that just briefly because I purchased those sorts of solutions. We
yeah,
purchased when I was at BP Books 24/7, all these kind of stuff. They don't work, and it's really interesting, perhaps for L&D people to understand why they don't work. Because what happens is you pilot them with a group of people, and it's like a bookshelf or Blinkist, and it's a one-page summary, Books 24/7, whatever. And everybody in the pilot says, "Yeah, this is great. This is cool. This has really saved me time." And on the basis of that business case, you roll it out and then nobody consumes them. And there's a couple of reasons why that happens, I think. Firstly, is that people only really consume stuff at points of need. So it's like you don't read your washing machine manual, but your washing machine breaks down and now you're looking through it. So it's like,
Mm,
yeah, unless the book, the Blinkist, unless it actually answers like the problem you've got right now, you can be pretty sure nobody's going to read it. But the other thing is, yeah, but sometimes people do read things, but often it comes from trust. So somebody might listen to this podcast and they might, have a relationship with you, Tom, and think, yeah, I like Tom, so I'm going to go off and hunt down that book. So just providing like a library of shortened things almost like doesn't do the job. You've got to have somebody who inspires you, makes you think, oh, I'll go and have a look at that. So yeah, it's
yeah,
interesting. Everyone thinks
I-
it's a good idea, but it consistently fails to work. And it means that they're missing something in the mix, I think.
yeah. It reminds me of, well, yeah, I think it's a bit like vinyl. So, I think reading books, there's a like an experiential quality about reading a book, which is you can sit in a coffee shop with a coffee and no one bothers you, and you can really get into it. Similarly with vinyl, there's a
Yeah.
performative aspect to it, and you can hear the difference in what you're listening to versus like a Spotify track, and that's never going to die out to some degree. There's always going to be a niche for it. So I think, I don't know, I agree with you, Nick. I think there's like it almost feels dirty to listen to what or to watch a clip of a film, because I do that on YouTube. I see like recently I've been sort of targeted with There Will Be Blood, which is like my favorite film,
Right.
little clips of that, and there are parts of that film that I just love. I just love Daniel Day-Lewis's acting. I love all of the context around it. I love the kind of conflict between him and the kind of main the other protagonist in it, and you get the kind of immediate dopamine hit of seeing the end, the I drink your milkshake scene, but then you just sort of feel like, yeah, but I've missed all of that quality of the build up to that, and now it just feels like it's cheapened it in some way. So I think books is still books are still on trend, but maybe they're just maybe they're just becoming more and more niche.
I just think that's one of the most brilliant and savage critiques of book reading, that they're dismissed because they're performative. Because what, you might be sitting in a coffee shop and there might be an attractive person on the other side, so you ought to have a book in your hand.
Yeah. You've
The
seen
is
is it Saltburn when he's like
the Wuthering Heights, or
he's waiting to bump into the mum so he can kill her, and he's like there in his coffee shop with glasses on, going, "Oh, I didn't see you there." So yeah, there's definitely.
Yeah. She says, "You're holding your book upside down."
Yeah. I've started a really interesting a thing with books now, where I had an ADHD diagnosis like last year, and I've had so many like unfinished books, and it's like I've got a bit and I'm like, oh yeah, getting it. And then I've been like buying loads of books, and then I just like read the first 3 bits of it. And what I've found is a way for me to learn and to get that information in is like audiobook, and like I read along with it. And that's how I get it in. So it's almost a bit of a weird one, because you get in the book, you buy the book twice effectively. But actually, that's the bit that helps. And there's some things where it just doesn't work in an audio book, particularly some of those business books. Like they've got a few things where actually like, okay, and then you want to just like stick a little post-it in the page and think, oh, that's one I'll use for this. Like, I really love books that you can do. Like there's things where it's like, right, now try this. And I'm like, okay, let me go and build something where I can test that out. But yeah, read along is my new hack for getting more books.
I think that's super cool. I think it's great, Tom. I think you discovered something there, because, as you say, if you're ADHD, then you're lacking stimulation, or you need more stimulation, and basically you're giving your brain what it wants by, at the same time as the audio, you're giving your eyes kind of something to do. I think, makes a lot of sense.
And then you feel like you haven't, like, I feel like I might have cheated a bit if I'm just like, I've just audiobooked it. But I'm like, when you can actually audiobook and read a whole long and I've closed the end, I'm like, I've completed that one.
Yeah. Yeah, makes me laugh because I was watching I suppose a life hack video from Jay Shetty, and he was like, "How do I read 50 books in a month?" And I watched the video, and he basically said that he doesn't read 50 books in a month. He basically just finds the chapters in books and reads like 3 pages of that one chapter, and just he uses it more of a resource and less of a book. So I was like, yeah, that's not quite the same thing. So yeah,
it's funny you mention him though, because actually that's one of the books I'm reading whilst I'm out in Thailand, is How to Think Like a Monk. So by Jay Shetty. So that's my
right.
That's one.
What
I'm
is his 2 weeks in? What is his 2 weeks in the mountains teaching?
Yeah. No, there's I'm only just at the beginning part of this one, so we'll see. But yeah, it is an interesting.
I did a sketch on TikTok on spiritual influences, and I think Jay was one of my kind of muses for that. I think they're starting to turn up in the Epstein files now, aren't they? It's kind of like I'm fairly critical of that kind of performative spirituality. That's what it is. It's like and so maybe I'm going on a bit of a rant, but there's Jeff, the therapist who I follow, who says the problem with a spiritual influencer is that they've got nothing to say on, any of the kind of atrocities that are being committed. So their whole message is like love, laugh, live, whatever it is. But when it says, well, what do you think of this horrific thing that's happening over here? It's like, oh, no, my comments are not available, or, because it's effectively marketing. It's like, and, you just want to keep your message as broad as possible to attract as many people. And so I'm kind of deeply skeptical, I guess, of that whole world, and how it's been commercialized, I guess.
I've got a friend of a friend who's or acquaintance, I would say, who's a spiritual influencer, who's the son of the local landlord in my local pub.
Yeah.
And he's got a bit of a following, and he also deals drugs and has inner monologues, in a dialogue with the quote unquote the spirit.
Is that a result of the products that he's selling?
I think it probably doesn't make it any better. No. So yeah, he's a kind of a direct. I get that direct experience from him all the time. He's always there to give me advice on, on my addiction and how I should how I should manage my drinking and all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah, but
yeah,
oh my
he's
God, I mean, it's true, isn't it, though, that the same thing happens in business, is that, the most awful person know gets made redundant, and now they're a life coach, or
yeah.
they've started up as a leadership coach.
Mm.
I don't know. I want to be so too cynical, but I do think once you start to kind of commercialize that kind of advice, there is that kind of deep craving that you're satisfying in people to feel like they're important and their journey is kind of special, and it almost seems like the most awful thing to do, to just turn that into a money making machine. But yeah.
You you were posting the other week on LinkedIn, Nick, and I thought it was interesting because you basically, I think you were basically saying, why has LinkedIn just become a horrible shop window for everyone kind of spouting marketing gumph? Maybe I'm paraphrasing a little bit too much, but I guess I was going to ask you about why does that bother you so much?
That's a good question. I'd be keen to hear, Tom's take on it, and as well as yours. I guess I'd seen this thing which triggered me. I guess it's used
Mm,
the damn the kids expression, where somebody was parodying all, and we laugh at these things, the awfulness of LinkedIn. But I have mixed feelings about it. I quite like LinkedIn in some ways because it's not anonymous. The really awful things I see from people are typically from people hiding under anonymity, and you see a lot of that on Twitter. Kind of, let's say. And so LinkedIn, the positive thing about it is people are held accountable, and I quite like that. I think people should be accountable. The downside to it, and the reason people parody it, is it's a first date. Everybody's pretending to be the best version of themselves, or even just pretending to be a better version of themselves than they are,
mm,
and that's a
mm,
very human thing. When you're on show, and it's a date in the sense that everybody's kind of selling themselves and their brand and so on. Then it's always got that slight whiff of inauthenticity. So working my way towards the answer to your question, Charlie, I think it's because something about me just reacts quite emotionally against inauthenticity and kind of fakeness. I don't ever feel that it leads in a good direction, even in business contexts. I think you want to build kind of authentic relationships, not just fake your way through your client kind of engagements or whatever. And so, yeah, I think a little bit of dressing up for a date is fine, but you at the point in which you're just overselling it, I think it starts to be cringe, and I think that's what's really going on. So I do, yeah. To summarize, I do think somehow it's become a world in which it's a lot harder for each of us, you, me, Tom, to find our kind of authentic voice, and I just feel that's important.
Yeah, I think it's like it's such uh, a fine line to strike when it comes to LinkedIn. For me, it's been like I started posting like on LinkedIn back in COVID when I was doing like um future workplace strategy work and like going in and out of offices when nobody else was. So I just started my little like blog of the hybrid chronicles. Like I think one of them I'm walking across London Bridge like that and there's no traffic at all around. It was almost like people were quite intrigued as to what was going on and it was just like walking through empty offices. So that kind of made me see sort of almost how that reach could work. And then I've kind of been on a bit of a journey over the last year, knowing what I was going to do and setting myself up as a solopreneur, and actually the value that network has for me. So it's almost like it's really tricky because I'm like I want to say look, I'm available and I'm available to work. I'm looking for collaborations, want to work with like-minded, interested people, but in a way that isn't cringe, and then it keeps the like your own authenticity to it. And I can definitely look back and say, like, some of my LinkedIn has probably been like super cringe as I've been kind of getting through that like testing phase, and then like trying videos, which there's like never seemed like just doesn't seem to work, and so but it is a really tricky one, and I think like um, it's finding that. You've just nailed it with authenticity. Like I will make sure that anything that I'm putting out, um, I want it to sound like me. Like it should sound like who I am and what I'm about and the things that I talk about. And yeah, then, but there's probably gonna be some subtle calls to action in there. But actually, like, yeah, but it's a tricky line to strike. But I also think as a platform, somebody that's going out solo and looking to broaden my network into different industries, it's also an invaluable networking tool. But it does have cringe potential, definitely, if you're not careful.
We should get some cringe posts up and
I'll try
and
and dig
critique
out my
some.
most cringe, my
Sorry,
most cringe posts.
yeah, yeah.
I
I
think
don't
it's
know.
like a vanilla ice cream dilemma, though, as well. Is like the most popular thing to say if you're looking to market yourself. The most popular thing to say is like the most bland thing to say. Like the most popular flavor ends up being the blandest flavor. Do you know what I mean? And so it's like
Mm.
that's an important decision for people to take, which is, do they just want to be as bland and generic and live, laugh, love as possible? Which is why people are afraid quite often to express a position on things on LinkedIn,
Mm,
or do you
yeah.
just want to, run the risk that you're going to switch off some of your potential customers and actually say something interesting?
There's the
And I
Roger
think
Shank
that's
litmus test, as we talk about next. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, no, I think there's definitely like if you're going to do anything, have a point of view. Like that's the thing. I think if you're on the fence with it, it's like, well, why should I pick you? And actually, that you've got to turn a few people off in that kind of. And I think that's probably where I will try and I don't know, I'm probably not going that far with the provocations, but like being more provocative on Instagram and TikTok and just like seeing like how that might land. And then I'm like, could be an interesting post to then position in a slightly different way. So like I did one on like why I think the 4-day week will never work, right? Because of basically it's the fact that we're creating another rigid process that people will just have to be part of, and then that's not going to work for everyone. Flexibility, but actually just by saying this will never work, it's almost like you're setting out your kind of you're setting out the space to open up a conversation, and that's when you can start to go down follow some really interesting threads with people that have perspectives. Is what I found.
What's the litmus test, Charlie?
The Roger Shank litmus test. Are you just saying? Are you basically just insulting everybody and calling them idiots because that's what you believe? But ultimately, it's only going to lead to one thing, which is just a really ragey, angry person in a hole somewhere. Basically, that's the
But
that's the
look,
litmus
we
test.
shouldn't be dismissive about Professor Roger Shank. Aside from being a kind of a friend, was one of the giants of artificial intelligence and cognitive science. I used to teach his stuff. He was a professor at Yale University, did all this stuff, Shank and Abelson on scripts and how computers, understand context and whatever. But it is really interesting. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I think, but that is often the case with people. I worked with somebody on a leadership program for senior Oxford academics, and they were just utterly lacking in any kind of emotional intelligence or self-awareness to the extent that it was almost impossible for people to work with them. And they couldn't conceive of actually taking any advice from anybody else on those things. So there is that extent to which people who are so accomplished in one field will have that capability at the kind of the expense of other things. Yeah, I kind of get that, but ultimately, I think he was right. I mean, he was right about so many of the things that he said. But the point I'm working my way to is that we touched on this with Bridge last week in a business and a progressive context. As somebody who likes to think of myself as trying to push progress along, you can't climb the top of the mountain on your own. If you do, you'll just find yourself utterly alone, yelling at people from the top of the mountain, like, "What are you doing down there?" And I've been
I
there.
can't hear you anyway.
Like, everybody just ignores you. I mean, it's like, "Why don't you climb up here?" Yeah, I'm not going to, thanks.
Yeah, I think the thing that, because I had this conversation earlier in the week with somebody else who is also getting frustrated by, I think probably just people that he knows don't know what they're talking about, saying the same stuff. And I said, well, firstly, I've basically switched all of that off. So I basically turned off and stopped following anyone that's upsetting me, so I don't have that negativity in my life. But secondly, I think the way I see it is, it's fine if you show people an alternative. I think the stuff that galls me is when people just talk about stuff but don't actually show you an alternative. And actually, when you look behind the curtain, it just looks the same as everybody else's stuff. In our context, it's more recently, L&D needs to become a strategic business partner, which is kind of the conversation we had a couple of episodes ago, Nick. And then when you go into those organizations, you find out how that looks. They're still just taking orders and doing e-learning. So it's just people saying the right stuff, but without actually really knowing what it means. And I think that's doing a disservice to people that are listening and following them, because ultimately they're being set up
Yeah, it's a
for a
good point.
failure.
I'd like to take it a step further, which is something that will start to bug you if it hasn't already, as you get more knowledgeable about discipline, is the success of nonsense. So, as a real case, I've heard of some influencers on TikTok who are like let's say health and exercise influence, who have just said, "Look, we're just shutting down our account because the accounts selling ridiculous kind of fake products or whatever are just too successful out there." And in
Mm,
almost every field, it's going in the wrong direction. It's actually the nonsense that's more successful. And so, yeah, you often end up
mm.
having to grapple with that, whatever discipline that you sort of work in.
What grinds your gears, Tom, in culture?
Oh, do you know what? So the biggest thing for me is like, so I hate being told what to do, right? I think everybody hates being told what to do. I think when you tell somebody like, this is what we need to, this is the culture around here. Like, I'm just such a fan of, like, if you bring people together and co-create the thing, like, you'll have so much more advocacy and people feel ownership for that thing, and that's like the biggest thing for culture. So I think it's almost like you can come up with at like a high level within an organization some of the themes that you want to go after and the kind of culture you want to create, but actually to make it stick and to make it real, it needs to be co-created by the people that are within it. And I think that's that, like, and I call it this shift from control to co-creation. Like, and it's why sort of the way that I work and operate, there's co-creation is like the biggest part of it being something that's done together, whether that's kind of leaders and grassroots change makers, bring them together and work them together as a squad to develop the thing. And that way you've just got that people that feel like they own that and that actually feel responsible and proud of it and want to protect it and nurture it and look after it. Uh,
Mm,
so that's the one. That's it for me, really. Co-creation
mm.
all the way.
So you hate egos. What's the
I think that's an interesting question, right? Is it egos or is it egos that don't like deserve to be to be like be giving themselves the like that kind of, if you, I don't mind an ego if it's like based on good stuff, like an actual like real things and outcomes, and you're like generous and like human with it. What I don't like is when people have got that ego but have got nothing to back it up, and they're just like do it because I'm the boss. Like, that just doesn't work for me.
Mm, mm. I was just thinking, so the okay, I don't know if you listened to the episode we were talking about the leopard in the woods. I
Not.
thought it was okay. So basically, it was a long story. I'm not going to tell the whole story. The analogy was a leopard in the woods is something that you how would I describe it? Something that might get you that Nick, you might have to describe this for me because I'm struggling. Do you know what I'm talking about with a leopard?
Yeah, I remember it. Yeah, you said,
Yeah,
what was it, the leopard or was it the jaguar? I think it was
that's
the
a
jaguar.
jaguar.
What is the
That's
thing
it.
that
Yeah,
hunts you? You were talking
that
about what is
hunts
the
you.
thing that
Yeah.
sort of hunts you, haunts you, maybe?
Mm.
That kind of you think
Won't
you
go away.
you can shed, but it won't go away. Yeah.
Does that make any sense, Tom?
It might just be this late here. So yeah, but yeah. So the leopard or the
What
jaguar
are you
is
most
hunting
The
you.
question is, what are you most haunted by in your work that won't go away?
Okay, got it. What am I most haunted by that won't go away? This is because it's rules, right? Just rules of like, this is the way that things have to be done. Like policies and like this is the way things have always been done. No matter like, and I spent like I just spend so much time asking why to people and leadership teams. Like, well, why? Why do you do it like that? Why did it get to the fifth why? And they're like, don't really know, but actually maybe there is a better way of doing it. So I think there's almost like this kind of hiding behind policies and frameworks and rules, even when like that kind of the opportunity to do something better is seeded somewhere in people's mind, but they just won't, they can't break through that barrier. Like I've always called myself like a friendly disruptor and like a good troublemaker within an organization. So I'd always go around and try and cause good trouble and start good little fires that are like going to get people excited about stuff. And I think that's just in my nature. But I recognize that for a lot of people it isn't. And actually, like I worry about how much like creativity is being held back because people feel that they can't. Like so. I don't know whether you can make like a rule breaking day or like a day where you just like chuck everything. What's there a film, isn't there? Like, The Purge or something like that. Like, could you do like a workplace purge where like everything is up for grabs like one day to like redesign your organization?
Murder's allowed for a day.
Which we'd have to put a policy in though, right? Then for that to say, but no murder.
But
so I don't
Workplace
know.
purge. That's how to get culture right, for sure.
Room 101 for the workplace.
I can see why Chima hired you. And I think it's interesting because you do something I think all of us do, which is you project. So at one point, Tom, you said, nobody likes being told what to do. And I thought, really? I think it's you that doesn't like being told what to do, because I think what you're encountering is also what I've encountered, which is there's an awful lot of people who do kind of like being told what to do. That's because their parents told them what to do, typically, and then their teachers told them what to do. And then they got grades based on how good they were at being told what to do. And then they got hired on the basis of those grades. And now they kind of like having a boss who tells them what to do and rules that they can follow. And then when somebody like you or me or potentially Charlie comes along and says, but why? It's a deeply unsettling experience. It's kind of like, well, because I would be worried about, it's often the answer is emotional, frankly. They won't necessarily tell you this, but they'll say, because I'd be worried about getting into trouble. That's what's behind it. So I don't want to get into trouble. And it's very rare that somebody in an organization will say that. They'll come up with something else, like we've always done it this way, or because that's the policy and the policy was signed off by this group, or because it's there to protect us forever. But what they're really thinking is, I might get into trouble. And so I liked your expression, Tom, and a good troublemaker, because it is trouble to people. And somehow you have to persuade them that it will be good trouble and not bad trouble. And that can be a bit of an uphill struggle sometimes, you know?
No, I agree with you actually. Like it is interesting. It's like that's my default setting, but for a lot of people it's not. And like even to the way that I would dress when I was working in Lloyd's, like I would deliberately walk into like certain meetings in my like green Adidas Originals track top and a backwards baseball cap, and like what loads of senior leads look at me like, who is this guy? Like who do you think you are walking around the exec floor like this? I'm like, okay, but and I realised like but then the thing that I learned a lot from working with Sharon was like this kind of like whatever you do, like you can set the tone to like what we want this to be like around here. So it was almost like becoming like the way that I just kind of people just kind of knew me for being that guy that comes in and then you know that meeting is going to be different in some way. So it kind of worked for me.
My favorite example. Two examples. My favorite example of all, when we joined PA Consulting, somebody I worked with, Barbara Thompson, came in one day, shout out to Barbara, wearing a one-piece camo jumpsuit. And she looked amazing in it. And some partner or some stuffy old git had the temerity to say, maybe give this person some feedback. They shouldn't dress like that. And it was like, no, like, no, we're not going to do that. And it's like, because what kills creativity. And Bridge, who was on last week, I remember telling me that he had some feedback from a partner, maybe you should wear a tie more often. And I think what you're talking about, Tom, is really important, because how you dress is signaling of conformity. And to say to somebody explicitly that if you just look like you conform more, you'll get ahead, that is indicative of some of the most toxic aspects of culture. So really, you want to look at your executive leadership and see that they're, dressed like, who is it? The village people, because that's the point at which you know that creativity and diversity and inclusivity is genuine, is authentic. But if they're all marching up and down in suits and ties and talking the same way, then it's just PR.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like the idea that, Tom, your brand is I set fire to stuff.
Yeah.
There's definitely like a brand hook for that, which is like just you going around lighting people's trousers on fire.
Walking on stage to like fire start, or like if I was going to start a keynote or something, like I don't know.
I want to
I'm
see you
not
with the
sure.
scissors, Tom, just snipping people's ties, like the front row. Go to a conference. People would never forget this, and just snip
Exactly. Yeah.
the ties like this. Forget it all.
Put that in my workshop toolkit. Like, yeah, a pair of scissors, a big chunky pair of kitchen scissors that can definitely handle a TM Lewin tie. That's what it is.
Yeah. Conversely, I was in Charles Thwit's yesterday buying some new chinos for my client meetings.
Why does that
So,
not surprise me?
So, shout out to the suits out there. Sometimes
I'm surprised they're still those high street stores. How are they surviving? I'm not. Who wears a suit and a tie these days, apart from you, Charlie?
well, I just wear chinos and a shirt, but
Yeah.
Big up the suit. I definitely like when I left my branch retail role, I committed to just getting rid of all of my ties, and since then, because I had to wear one every day. But it's quite nice now because when I do wear a suit, it feels quite
look how
special.
dapper I am. Yeah.
Look at this guy. Like I'm quite into it. So it makes wearing a suit special again for me. So I'm here for that.
Yeah, good. So we're out of time. Tom, have you got any pluggables to plug? Like any stuff you're working on, or you just want people to get in touch if they want some stuff setting on fire? What's the...
Yeah, if people are looking for a twisted fire starter, then as you probably heard, best place to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm always sort of sharing sort of the musings around the future of work and what's going on there. So that's kind of always a good place to follow. If you want the more provocative stuff, then it's the same, Tom Kegode on TikTok and Instagram as well. But yeah, I think part of the reason I left, right? Part of the reason I left this big corporate I've been in was just because I want to work with like-minded people that want to set fire to a few things and have a lot of fun whilst we're doing it. So yeah, anyone that's sort of up for some of that thinking, yeah, get in touch and let's have a chat.
Love that. All right. Thanks, guys. Yeah. Enjoy the rest of your day. Get some sleep, Tom, for your flight.
Yeah, no, it's been great to chat. So yeah, speak to you soon.